I'll never forget that feeling, the one where your stomach turns cold and the air suddenly feels thinner. It was the third morning of my solo trek through the Sawtooth Range, and I'd just realised my single map, folded neatly inside a Ziploc bag, was gone. It must have slipped out the night before when I pulled out my journal, or maybe the wind carried it off while I was pitching camp near Redfish Creek. Either way, it was gone, and I still had 2 days of hiking left through a network of trails that spidered in every direction. No signal, no GPS, no one else around. Just me, the mountains, and my memory of how the valleys and ridges connected. I sat down on a boulder, trying not to panic. The fire of the morning sun hadn't yet cleared the peaks, and the frost still clung to the grass around my boots. I pulled out my remaining food, a couple of granola bars, some jerky, half a bag of trail mix, and started rationing mentally. If I made no wrong turns, I could be out by tomorrow evening. But if I missed even one junction, I might wander for days. That's how people end up in survival books, I thought grimly. The trick, I told myself, was discipline. No rushing, no second guessing once I chose a path. I studied the skyline, tracing the familiar tooth-like ridge I'd seen from camp. I remembered the contour lines on that lost map, the curve of a lake like a bent finger, the way the main trail crossed the creek twice before turning west. I forced those images to the front of my mind, as if I could tattoo them there before they faded. By noon, I'd started walking again. Every few hundred yards, I marked a small cairn or scratched a symbol on a fallen log, an instinct older than maps themselves. The wind was dry, whispering through the pines, and I followed it as if it carried memory itself. My legs burned from the incline, but I refused to rest. Each stop meant more time for doubt to creep in, and doubt out there was the first step toward being lost for good. When the sun finally dipped low, I camped on a small rise overlooking a valley that looked almost familiar. The shadows pooled deep and blue in the hollows. I made myself a tiny fire and ate half a granola bar, saving the rest. The smoke curled upward into the cold air, and I watched it twist among the stars. I whispered quietly, like a promise to myself. Tomorrow, you walk steady. No fear, just forward. The map was gone, but maybe I didn't need it. Not if I could hold the land in my head, one careful step at a time. Morning came sharp and clear, the kind that bites your fingertips when you untie the tent flap. I boiled the last of my coffee, barely half a cup, and watched the steam twist upward like a ghost from the ashes. My breath joined it, white in the cold air. I felt smaller than the mountains, but that wasn't new. What was new was the sense that I was walking on borrowed certainty. Without that map, every footstep had to be its own decision. Packed slowly, double-checking each item as if ritual could ward off further mistakes. Compass, thank God I hadn't lost that. Knife, first aid kit, extra socks, one emergency flare. My food bag felt light as air when I slung it on. I could stretch it one more day, maybe two, if I got lucky and found huckleberries or trout in one of the creeks. But luck was a thin blanket out here. Discipline was thicker. The valley floor dropped into a long sweep of meadow, golden and waving in the breeze. Beyond it rose a tangle of ridges, their spines jagged against the morning light. Somewhere behind those was the exit trail that led back to Redfish Lake. I took a bearing with the compass, roughly west-northwest, and started walking. Every few minutes, I forced myself to pause, turn, and look behind me. It's one of those old guide habits. The world looks different when you're coming back, and I wanted to remember every angle of every ridge. The sun climbed higher, burning the dew from the grass, and the insects came alive. A soft buzz, constant and steady, like the heartbeat of the land. By midday, I found a creek, cold and fast. I knelt to refill my bottle and studied the flow. It ran north, which meant I was still too far east. I followed it upstream until it split around a granite boulder. On the far side, the trail, no, more of a game path, veered upward into thick pine. My calves screamed at the climb, but the smell of sap and damp bark kept me steady. There's something grounding about that scent. It tells you you're still part of the living world, even when you're lost in it. When I finally reached the top, I could see the horizon. A wide basin stretched out, dotted with small lakes that flashed silver in the light. I tried to match them to memory, but doubt flickered again. One wrong lake and I'd circle for hours. So I did what the old-timers always said. Trust the land, not your fear. I fixed my eyes on the basin's far ridge, took a compass reading, and began the long descent. That night, I rationed another half meal and made a small fire under a crooked pine. My stomach growled like an animal caged inside me, but I ignored it. I had one goal: wake up still sure of my direction. Out here, losing belief in your own bearings was worse than losing the map itself. I woke before dawn, the world still grey and silent, except for the slow whisper of the wind through the needles above. My breath puffed into the chill, and for a few minutes, I just lay there, listening, measuring the distance between myself and comfort. Hunger had a pulse by then, steady and mean. I chewed the last bit of jerky, tiny strips I'd saved from the night before, and drank a swallow of cold creek water. That would have to do. When the first band of sunlight brushed the ridge, I packed camp and started again. Each step had to count now. My legs were sore from the climb yesterday, but sore muscles were easier to manage than a wandering mind. I set rhythm. 50 steps, then pause, count the heartbeats, breathe, 50 more. The discipline became a kind of prayer, mechanical but comforting. The trail, if you could still call it that, narrowed into a corridor of rock. Pikers chirped from the cracks, and once I heard the bark of something larger, maybe a fox. I pushed through a cluster of manzanita, and the smell of its resin stuck to my sleeves. For a moment, I thought I recognized the next ridge, its crooked shape like a giant's knuckle. But when I reached the top, the valley below wasn't what I'd expected. No lakes, no creek, just dry pine flats stretching toward a wall of shadowed cliffs. My chest tightened. I turned a slow circle, trying to spot any sign of the basin I'd seen yesterday, but everything looked different from up here. I forced myself to stop moving, to just breathe. Panic would eat more than calories. It would chew through judgment. So I sat down on a rock, pulled out my compass, and steadied the needle. West-northwest. I hadn't veered that far. Maybe the basin curved behind those cliffs. Maybe I could skirt along their base until I saw the water again. That thought gave me enough to stand up. By afternoon, the air had turned hot, the kind that draws sweat from you faster than you can drink. I stopped often at creeks, drinking sparingly, refilling. The sun carved deep shadows between the trees, and my head began to throb. I tore open the last granola bar and forced myself to break it in half, saving the rest for morning. When the sun started sinking, I came upon a dry meadow strewn with sage and volcanic rock. I could smell rain somewhere distant, metallic and clean. I made camp at the edge, built no fire, didn't have the energy or reason to waste the matches. Instead, I lay back on the cold ground, watching the first stars appear. I thought of that lost map again, the neat folds, the contour lines I'd memorized too late, and felt something shift. It wasn't regret anymore, it was respect. The land didn't care if I had a map or not. It would show me its way only if I moved slow enough to see. I close my eyes, whispering to the night. Tomorrow, the ridge. Keep your heading. Keep your faith. At dawn, clouds pressed low against the peaks, heavy and grey, promising rain. The air felt thick, like the whole mountain was holding its breath. I packed quickly, tightening every strap, checking and rechecking that nothing was left behind. When the map is gone, the only way to stay found is to make sure you don't lose anything else. I began climbing toward the ridge. The slope was steep and loose, scree sliding out beneath each step. I leaned into the incline, breathing through my teeth to steady my pace. Every muscle protested, but I kept a rhythm. Step, plant, breathe. The rain began as a mist, cool on my neck, then thickened to a steady drizzle that slicked the granite. The wind came next, sharp and howling through the passes. My jacket wasn't made for this, but stopping wasn't an option. Movement meant warmth, and warmth meant life. Halfway up, I slipped, hands scraping the rock, knee twisting hard. For a moment, I just lay there, face pressed to the cold stone, feeling the mountain's pulse beneath me. I wanted to curse, but instead, I laughed once, a dry, humorless sound. "Not yet," I muttered. Then I pushed myself up and kept climbing. When I reached the top, the clouds broke for a heartbeat, just long enough for sunlight to wash across the land below. What I saw nearly made me drop to my knees. A faint shimmer, a familiar shape. A lake, small and round, tucked in a bowl of dark pine. I remembered it from the map. It was real. Relief came so suddenly it made me dizzy. I took a compass reading to lock the direction in my mind, then began descending carefully, 1 foot at a time, as if the whole mountain might vanish if I moved too quickly. By afternoon, the storm returned in full force. Rain hammered the trees, turning the ground to mud. My boots filled with water, every step squelching. But I kept moving toward that lake. Hunger gnawed at my gut, sharp as a blade. I tried not to think about food, focusing instead on rhythm and breath. The trees blurred into streaks of grey and green, the wind roaring like an ocean. When I finally reached the lakeshore, the storm had eased into a steady drizzle. I knelt at the edge, cupped my hands, and drank deeply. The water was cold enough to sting my teeth, but it revived me. The lake meant I was close. The outlet stream should lead to the main trail. I followed it until I found a flat spot beneath a leaning spruce. There, I built a small fire with damp wood, coaxing it to life with the last 2 matches. As the flames steadied, I felt the first real calm in days. My clothes steamed, the smoke curled upward, and the sound of rain softened around me. I wasn't out yet, but I knew the way now. The compass pointed true, and for the first time since losing that map, I trusted it completely. That night, I slept deeply, cradled by the sound of dripping branches and the steady crackle of the fire, the storm fading into a lullaby. When dawn came again, it was golden and clean, as if the storm had scrubbed the whole world. Mist rose off the lake in slow ribbons, curling around the pines before drifting upward to vanish in the light. My body felt like stone, aching, hollow. But there was strength in it too. The quiet kind that builds only when you've had no other choice. I stirred the embers of the fire back to life, warmed my hands, and stared at the few crumbs left in my food bag. I ate one. just for the ritual of it. The rest I scattered into the trees. Some bird could make better use of it than I could now. The creek running from the lake was my lifeline. I followed its flow through the pines, across flats of slick rock, through meadows where dew clung to the grass like glass beads. It twisted west, just as I'd hoped, winding toward a valley that deepened with every mile. I walked in silence, the rhythm of my steps syncing with a murmur of water. That sound became everything: compass, heartbeat, prayer. By mid-morning, the forest opened, and there it was, a weathered trail marker nailed to an old spruce, initials carved by countless hikers before me. I pressed my palm against the wood and let out a long, shaking breath. The trail. The real one. It felt like stepping into sunlight after days underground. I laughed then, quietly at first, then louder until my voice startled a raven from a nearby branch. I didn't hurry. The worst was behind me, but I'd learned what rushing cost. Every bend of that trail felt like an earned gift. The scent of sun-warmed pine needles, the crunch of gravel underfoot, the soft thunder of a distant waterfall. I stopped often, not because I was tired, but because I didn't want to miss any of it. When I finally reached the trailhead that afternoon, there was an old ranger cabin nearby. The door stood open, and inside, tacked to the wall, was a laminated map of the range. My route traced faintly across it, familiar and foreign all at once. I stood there a long time, studying the lines, the lakes, the curves I'd memorized by feel. It struck me how fragile that piece of paper seemed, thin, temporary, and how much stronger my own sense of direction had grown in its absence. Outside, I sat on the steps of the cabin, watching the clouds drift over the peaks I'd just crossed. I thought about all the moments I'd wanted to quit. The hunger, the fear, the aching climb, and how every one of them had shaped the steady rhythm that carried me out. Sometimes we think survival is about strength, but it isn't. It's about trust. Trust in your senses, in your memory, in your patience when panic wants to take the lead. That's the lesson the mountains gave me. As I started down the dirt road toward the highway, I looked back one last time. The peaks shimmered in the distance, sharp and calm, like they'd been watching the whole time, just waiting for me to learn how to see them properly.